Retired professor of theology, philosophy, an academic with 40-plus years experience in higher education, crafting lessons in Native American culture, Zen, and existentialism. Father of a podcaster who will wax poetic about Beavis and Butthead.
Oh boy, it's a time travel podcast. My name is Nate, and as he goes, so goes this sequel.
Oh.
As Brian Martin.
How are you?
Guerrilla podcasting today.
Vacation podcasting for you.
Yeah, new spot for us, new acoustics, new audio setup. Who knows how any of this is going to work out, but it's in interview mode because we have our second guest ever.
Oh, wow.
This is my father, Lawrence Bowden. Dad, you want to say hello?
Hello.
Hello.
Nice to meet you, Brian.
Nice to meet you too, Mr. Bowden. Is it Mr.? Is it Doctor? What's the title?
It's Larry.
No, he has a doctorate.
Dr. Larry. All right, got it. We'll do Dr. Larry, meet in the middle. Perfect.
But like I said, I got a microphone on a stool and a computer over here.
There's been a lot of talk. I know they don't hear this part, but before we got started, there were a lot of talks of cleaning things up on the back end and stools. And to the untrained ear, it could all sound very disgusting.
Yeah, the first time we did this, you said you were recording in a closet.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So, we've come a long way.
We have, yeah.
But when we last talked about Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse 5, the hope was to maybe have my dad here to give his 2 cents on the book, and we weren't able to make it work. But now I'm up here on vacation, and I nabbed him.
Nabbed him. And now he's being held hostage, so he has to.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. The gun is at my old memory. A book that I haven't looked at for 30 years, but I reread it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow.
That's the first thing you actually mentioned to me, Dad. There's a different perspective to Slaughterhouse after having read it 30 plus years ago and what you're getting from it now.
Yeah, I think what I was saying is that I saw some things that I hadn't seen before, or at least at my age, couldn't remember having seen.
Like, what kinds of things are we talking about?
Just some simple little stuff. Like, for one thing, I was paying a lot of attention to the naming of these characters. Billy Pilgrim, for example.
Yeah.
What kind of pilgrim is he? Or is he a pilgrim? Or Elliot Rosewater, for example. Now, if you've ever smelled rosewater?
No.
Well, it smells like roses. And you know how he puts the rose and the mustard gas together?
Oh, yeah.
Is Rosewater's the one that was in the hospital?
He's the one
that had the collection of books?
Yes, that introduced Kilgore Trout.
Okay.
To Billy. Okay. And then, of course, you have the wonderful Rumford. You remember Rumford?
No.
Well, Rumford, of course, was the military historian who was writing the history of the Army Air Corps in the Second World War, right?
Okay.
And he's the one who he also met Billy in the hospital and thought Billy was just barely above a banana. You know, he said, I could carve a banana that's more human than this guy. Until,
your recollection is way better than mine at your advanced age, sir.
Well, we read this like a month and a half ago. And it's already like, who? Pilgrim, what?
I might say, I told Nate yesterday when we were in the car, I said, I enjoyed your podcast, but you guys had trouble getting started. You spent a lot of time trying to figure out where are we going to go with this? Because the podcast is about time travel, right?
Right.
And I would have thought maybe that had been the focus, but you didn't really get to time travel until the last 10 minutes of the podcast.
Yeah, that's when we had to rate the method of time travel.
Yeah, that's right. But so there were those names that popped out at me and made me think of the associations those names had with some of the issues that Vonnegut is trying to address in Slaughterhouse 5. And then there were things like colors. Do you remember the colors that he kept introducing, like whether he's talking about blue and white feet, or he's talking about the clownish dress?
I remember that. That one general, yeah.
Yeah, well, the narrator was describing Billy's dress, of course, and being very clownish. And what were his clothes? What were those colors, and why were those colors of import? Now, an aside here, Brian, I have to tell you that in my retirement, I've become a painter, and because of my son and you, I've just begun to try to do a painting, kind of in response to Billy Pilgrim.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Okay.
as long as it's not in response to us and to this podcast.
Well, it wouldn't have happened without you and your podcast. I mean, that's what's really cool. So the colors that are mentioned more than once in this, and I'm talking about these things that popped out to me that I didn't ever think about when I was actually...
I didn't think about it either.
Yeah, well, maybe they're not worth thinking about, but Billy's outfit, and it's referred to more than once in the text, is azure and silver. Now, azure, in case you're not aware, is
it's like a
blue.
Bluish.
It's a gorgeous, beautiful, scene-like blue. And then there were those boots that he wore that were silver. Now, why silver and blue? And do those colors have anything to do with the orientation or the narrative or the philosophy, really, that Vonnegut is trying to show us rather than tell us?
So what is the significance of blue and silver then?
Well,
I mean, what is that? Hanukkah? Like, I'm not sure.
well,
What would the significance of a color be in anti-war literature?
Well, that's another question I was going to ask you guys. What makes this an anti-war novel? But that's maybe for a little bit down the road. I'm going to pitch it over to my friend Brian here and invite him to tell us what silver and azure do for him.
Oh, geez. I don't think I know.
I already took Hanukkah, so
You took Hanukkah.
that's what it means to me.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
well, silver and blue are both very spiritual colors. For
Okay.
one
I was
thing.
thinking sky and clouds and
Exactly. Sky
Yeah.
and clouds.
Okay.
And then silver and gold are the precious metals of life. And the silver becomes the foundation. I'm really stretching it here.
I was going to say, now, is this something that you're taking from it, or do you
Yes.
think it's something that Vonnegut is trying to...
Yes, I would say yes simply because my favorite Vonnegut novel, Bluebeard,
Okay.
and that's all about art. And in fact, I did the painting that became the core of the story in Bluebeard. And I actually tried to reproduce that painting just for a joke, which I did. And I entered it in a show. It was accepted. And there were two bidders fighting over it.
What?
Oh, wow.
How am I now just hearing? Did you save this for the podcast?
No, it's just really true. It's just an example, though, of why I think color and art was very serious interest of Kurt Vonnegut's. And in fact, his definition of what an artist is, regardless of whether it's musical or literary or plastic, that is to say painting, sculpture, whatever, he said an artist is to try to make the viewer or the one who experiences it like life more than before.
Oh, that's nice.
The function of art is to make us like life more than before we had that experience.
Well, Brian just got back from Heroes Con and running an art auction, so I'm sure he spent money on things that will make him happier now.
It feels a little hollow a week later, but you know.
Well,
but I get what you're saying. It's not so much. I guess different art has different impacts, but I get what you're saying. I have a picture of Catwoman.
Nice.
That I acquired last week, right?
A picture
and
of
that's
who?
great.
Catwoman.
But the Julie Newmar Catwoman specifically from Batman, the
Okay.
60s show. And it's intrinsically pleasing, but I think the kind of art we're talking about would be something that is more widely accepted, right? Like as just a piece of art, not necessarily pop art so much as it is art for art's sake, right?
Well, what if we take Vonnegut's definition and apply it? He's an artist. He's a literary artist.
Mm-hmm.
Does reading Slaughterhouse 5 make us like life more than before we read it? That's using Vonnegut's definition of art.
Okay.
Does reading Slaughterhouse 5 make us like life more?
So that's what maybe at the end of the book, when the bird is speaking, to appreciate the fact that you're still here after.
What I take from that is that life is going to continue on even after this horrific bombing in Dresden, right? The birds are the representation of that continued life.
Right. Do you appreciate it now more than you did before? Is it an appreciation thing or just like a...
Well, the word he used was like.
Like.
Do you like life more than before for having experienced whatever art it is?
Right. Okay, so tie that back into the blue and silver.
Okay, well, I think that for me, at least, that goes back to the question of who Billy Pilgrim is and what does Billy Pilgrim show us. Remember, Billy Pilgrim is, what's his profession?
Optometry.
And what does optometry do?
Lets you see better.
Helps us see things.
It clears our vision, sharpens our vision, and helps us to see.
God.
What was Billy's mission? There were three things that he wanted to communicate and wanted us to see. Not just say, but to see. One was flying saucers. Remember that?
Yeah.
The other was the irrelevance, if you will, of death.
Right.
And the third was time travel. All right. Which brings us to your podcast, doesn't it?
Sort of.
Kind of. As you said, we didn't really talk much about time travel.
Well, that's exactly right, Brian. And what I remember is my son saying this wasn't really time travel.
I still don't think it was.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because that, I think, requires... Well, here I am. I'm sounding like a professor now.
Well, that's the point.
That's the actual reason you're here.
Yeah, right. Well, I hope it isn't because I'm not much of a professor anymore. But it does call for us to at least explore what we mean by the time travel. What does it mean, for example, that Billy Pilgrim is unstuck in time? By contrast, what would it mean to get stuck in time? Stuck in time is where we are, isn't it?
It's what we do normally.
It's what we do normally. Absolutely. How are we governed by time?
Okay.
We're governed in a linear mode of thinking, aren't we?
Yeah, all the coordination it took just to put this together in the last 2 hours. We were definitely governed by everyone's time.
Yes. But I'll bet we've all have to admit that we felt stuck by time.
Oh, God, yes.
And
Sure. Today.
how many mentions in this book does he give to the clock, to the watch, to the calendar? Okay, remember the one point when he doesn't know whether he's dead or alive? He's in the cave, and they turn out the lights, and it's totally dark in there, And one of the first thing Billy recognizes is he's not sure whether he's dead or alive. And then somebody holds up their watch with a radium dial. And suddenly the numbers appear. And then he knows.
You got all that, didn't you, Brian?
Well, I mean, I remember that part.
Okay, all right.
No,
You sound like one of my students now. Like, okay, he's off on mystery tour again.
No,
No.
This is the kind of thing that made me hesitant to cover the book at the very beginning. I mean, there's a difference between Back to the Future and The Terminator and Kurt Vonnegut. I mean, you're thinking about it on levels that I don't feel capable of myself. So it
has nothing to do with capability. It's just the quirky level of one's perceptions. You guys read this and you take it from a whole different context than I do. That doesn't mean you're not getting it. It means you're getting it in a different way.
Okay.
All right, so I have my way of getting it, and I look at blue and I look at silver and I think of spiritual issues. I think of time. I think of the dance with death, the duty dance with death. If we look at the title page...
that's one of the things I was going to say. When I told you that I was listening to the book, and you initially gave me some trouble about having listened to the book because you said the very first page, there was an image in your copy of the book that was important. You know, all I see is... who's the guy that read the book?
James Franco.
Yeah, James Franco's narration. So, what is this image? I haven't seen it.
Well, I'm not sure which one I was talking about. It was probably...
I don't think you had that copy yet, did you? Or
yeah, this is the one I've had for 35 years.
Sure, yeah, that's the same page I've got.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, that says Slaughterhouse 5, The Children's Crusade, A Duty Dance with Death.
Right.
Okay, so what that title tells us and frames us is what this whole book is about. Coming to terms, dancing with death, because if you think in existential terms, right, what are we born to do? For sure.
Yeah, we
die.
Born specifically to die? Some say we're born to live.
But we know what we're going to do.
It's inevitable, right? It's the only certainty in our life.
It's the only certainty, exactly. So he puts that in there, and it's very important. And I think part of what he wants us to wrestle with is this question of time. What do we do with our time? How do we use our time? And how does it stick us so we can't get out of the trap of just being locked into a pattern for which there is no escape? And sorry, Brian, but I told Nathaniel last night I pulled out the last book that he published, which is called The Man Without a Country. It's not a highly upbeat book, but one of the little passages here I thought I would share with you guys if we have
absolutely.
If we have the opportunity. Okay, so this is from...
Did you read it over here towards the mic?
Yeah, I keep wanting to read it to Brian.
Well,
here.
Brian's, yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
It's picking you up.
Okay, so Vonnegut writes, and this is prose, this is not fiction, okay? He says, the biggest truth to face now, what is probably making me unfunny now and for the remainder of my life. Now, this was published in 2005.
That's 2-3 years before he died.
There you go. What is probably making me unfunny now and for the remainder of my life is that I don't think people give a damn whether the planet goes on or not. It seems to me as if everyone is living as members of Alcoholics Anonymous do, day by day. And a few more days will be enough. I know of very few people who are dreaming of a world for their grandchildren.
Yeah. Well, what's making you unfunny, Brian? We have trouble with that every week.
I'm pretty sure it's exactly what Vonnegut's talking about here.
Yeah, no, That's yeah, uplifting I would not call that.
Well, that passage is not uplifting, but it's very realistic.
But are you happier after having read it? Do you like life better?
Yeah, you don't have to be happy, but
I mean, there's always a context, but the point to me is that when I read that and I hear truth, I know what I need to do, and I know how I need to respond. And it's very challenging. That doesn't mean it's easy, but having read this, and I'm holding up.
Yeah, it's an audio medium here, Dad.
Yeah, I've got to remember we're not on a screen. But I think one of the reasons that Vonnegut's book is so powerful is because he portrays in extremely uncommon ways the horror and the great mistake that human beings make by not being humane and kind and enjoying the beauty that life affords us if we would just recognize it. And in fact, that brings me, we're going to get back to this time travel thing. I see how you guys easily get distracted, but one of the things...
That's Brian's fault.
yeah.
No, I appreciate
It's probably the olives and the whiskey.
Yeah, well, I blame it on Blonde and Simpsons references.
Yeah.
That's why we get distracted.
Well, apropos what I was just saying, there is a drawing in the book, son.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Everything was beautiful and nothing hurt.
Billy Pilgrim said that would be good on his gravestone, and then Vonnegut says, it would for me too.
Yeah, see,
Now,
because I thought Pilgrim was Vonnegut, and it was Brian that was sort of like, well, yeah, but Vonnegut's in the book, so...
Well, that goes back to the whole business of the structure of this novel, as metafiction and postmodernism and all the rest of that, which you don't need to talk about.
Good.
Right. But one of the things that I remember talking with my students about was this drawing of the tombstone with the bird at the top, the patuit. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This epithet, everything was beautiful and nothing hurt, is most often seen as one of Vonnegut's most cynical remarks. He's right in the middle of the bombing of Dresden.
Yeah.
Everything was beautiful and nothing hurt. Really?
Right.
How cynical could any one person be in the midst of a horror of the bombing of Dresden that was every bit as horrifying as Hiroshima or Nagasaki? Okay? So the question is then, is this his most cynical remark in this book? Or is it his most challenging revelation?
Oh, okay. Like looking past it to the scope of all existence, looking beyond this one moment.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the azure blue and the silver are so important, because it's calling us to awaken to another way of seeing, which Billy Pilgrim, as the optometrist, is trying to show us. And how does he do that? Part of the way he does that by dealing with this issue of time travel and Tralfamadore. Okay? I keep talking to Brian.
That's fine. I'm looking at him too. He's a good-looking man.
just keep staring at me.
But it's that experience of Tralfamadore that sets the context for understanding what Vonnegut thinks about time travel.
All of the things that you've just said, though, lead me to feel like it's even less about a physical time travel in the way that Brian and I typically discuss.
Which is, I think, why we had such a hard time talking about it on the show, is because I don't think either one of us believed it was legitimate time travel. It was more just a way of observing a life out of sequence.
Yes, and
right.
And you talked about that in the PTSD context, that basically what he's doing here is trying to come to terms with his post-traumatic stress.
And seeing everything, seeing big picture versus,
That's why I think you said, Nate, that this isn't real time travel. Well, no, that's legitimate. But I think what Vonnegut is wanting to get at here in time travel is what it is that he discovers in Tralfamadore, and he uses a science fiction kind of metaphor to be able to come to ideas and ways of seeing that he can then communicate with people who have not experienced that way of seeing the world. And the way Tralfamadorans see the world is in 4 dimensions, right?
It's like somebody pulling these curtains back. It was like, there's so much more that we didn't even scratch the surface on, I feel
Well, that's
like.
what I did caution that we were probably not going to even get remotely into the surface of this. But I do think it starts with like you're saying, Larry, the colors, right? Like it kind of just beckons that thought. Because the first thing I thought, and I don't want to rewind here completely, when you mentioned the colors, was that, without really picturing that, you're kind of left with the typical sort of drab imagery of wartime, right? I say
very good.
I say wartime, and all you picture are grays,
very good,
and blacks, and things like that. It's a drab experience, but the silver and the blue really stand out in contrast to that. So that's like the first key, right?
Okay, he gets an A on that paper.
Yeah, all right. I was thinking about transferring.
Yeah, I will admit the colors I did not even register with me as I was reading. So I really like this line of thought here.
We'll go back to, I'm sorry to cut you off. Yeah, okay, good. It feels like you were going to go there, but the science fiction aspect of it, that I feel like when I told you I was going to do this podcast and cover this book, you said, well, why was it science fiction? Why are there aliens? Or something to that effect. And I was like, well, okay, I'll try and pay attention to that. But it seems like you're headed there now.
Well, I think he's using the science fiction model, this is my opinion, certainly, as a way to introduce a metaphor that science fiction is uncannily gifted at doing.
Right.
And that is making us think outside of the box of time.
Mm-hmm.
To become unstuck, if you will. And as I started to say, on Tralfamadore, one of the things that Billy wants to bring back is how to see in 4 dimensions. And what would the 4th dimension be?
Is time, right?
Exactly. It's often understood to be time.
Marty McFly has a lot of trouble thinking 4th dimensionally. Remember in Back to the Future 3 when the bridge isn't there.
Right, it's not there yet, but it's going to be there.
But it's going to be there once you travel. Sorry.
No. This is good because that's stuff I don't know. I mean, part of the reason I don't listen to your podcast every time is because I don't know what you're talking about.
That makes 2 of us.
It's 3 of us. Yeah.
Well, all 3 of us.
But I will say, since we're doing some asides here, I did try to watch Millennium.
Oh, God. That was the one? Oh, man.
I couldn't do it. Okay.
Yeah, I can't fault you for that.
Just to go back to the 4th dimension, if you come to terms with seeing things in 4 dimensions...
Millennium. Okay.
I'm sorry. But if you come to terms with seeing things in 4 dimensions, which we have a horrible time doing, is that we can't get unstuck. The 4th dimension, just like the structure of this book, sees everything at whole. And you remember the Tralfamadorans, when they talk about how they see the world, they see everything all at once. This is why death is not an issue. You're in that condition for a little while, but then you're back somewhere
You're in
else.
all conditions at all times, so...
Well, yeah, you move from one to the other, so why grieve about where you are at the moment? It goes back to that old Chinese proverb, this too will pass.
So it goes.
That was another good question. I was going to ask you guys what it was.
I guess...
I just took it to be life.
Yeah, of all things,
Right.
basically. So it goes. Everything goes.
Like the scope,
Life.
not just like one life, but the scope of life itself.
Okay.
That's
So that could incorporate death. It's only coincidental that they say so it goes every time somebody dies.
Well, no, I mean, I think we talked a little bit about that. I think we actually talked about whether it was irrelevance or acceptance. And you were leaning towards acceptance, and I was like, that seems a lot more likely. But yeah, the reason I always expected that it'd be mentioned during a death, because it's like he's trying to point out that this is just a moment. Things are still going. And it's also all things all at once. So yeah, so it goes.
It feels cynical early on, right? It feels... Until we have more context, it feels just like, oh, another death, another death, another death. But then as we understand Billy's position and philosophy as governed by the Tralfamadorians or informed by them, we come to understand, I think, that it's not really him being dismissive about it. It's just him recognizing that this is just another stage of life and life continues.
Yeah. And he says as much as he's giving his speech right before his own death, at this speech in Chicago near the end of the book or what have you. And he says, if you're mourning my death or that this action that's going to be taken, then I've taught you nothing. Death is not something to concern yourself with so much because it's only part of a bigger picture.
Yeah.
So that one just kind of seems spelled out to me, which is why I got it. But as far as it just meant everything to me.
Well, remember... At one point, Billy says while he's on Tralfamador, I believe, it sounds like you don't believe in free will.
And humans are the only species they've encountered that have free will, or have a concept of free will.
And Earthlings, the Tralfamadorans say, are the only species that ask why. Why me?
Yeah.
Why not?
Right.
And part of that, again, I think comes back to this issue of time. Because if we live in a world where we're stuck with the irrefutable direction and the arrow of time taking us in one place, moving us in one direction to one ultimate end, which is death, that's it? And Tralfamadorans want to say, no. Because their worldview is holistic. They're seeing everything at once. So, okay, you'll be dead for a while, but then you better make good in this life because there are going to be a lot of times that you will experience this again. Right? Which comes back to a question I have to ask my son.
Oh, God.
No. Well, it's almost God. Not quite.
Do you remember when you were 10?
No. After you did the podcast, you sent me a video.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And you watched the video.
Right.
You said, I wish I had seen this video before we did the podcast. Why? That's the Earthling question. Why do you wish you'd seen that video? What difference would that video have made in how you would have read Slaughterhouse 5?
Oh, okay. Because he was funny. There's not context here, but I sent my father a video of a speech that Vonnegut was giving to...
It was a baccalaureate speech.
A baccalaureate speech, okay.
Yeah, at Carnegie Mellon.
Okay.
And he was funny, and he told funny anecdotes and envisioned people with their own stories. And I think that had I known that personality was the author of this book, I might have read things differently, because I think one of the questions I asked Brian was like, is this funny? I've read that this is supposed to be funny. Like, this is a funny... And
I was going to make the joke, and I completely forgot to, that it's called Slaughterhouse 5. So I'm glad we get a chance to drop that one. Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, you don't have to edit that one out. That's good.
At any rate, I didn't catch any humor in that book at all. So, I don't know. It felt like a perspective that I would have liked to have had going into reading it. And by reading it, I mean listen to it.
Okay. Now, let me pick up on something. In that video that you sent me, one of the things he did, he actually quotes in Slaughterhouse 5. And that's his uncle.
Okay.
What did his uncle, in that talk that you listened to, tell him? that he has actually made at the core, if you will, of much of his writing. His uncle said, "If that isn't nice, I don't know what is."
Oh, right.
And that's actually in Slaughterhouse 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And think of the moments in Slaughterhouse 5.
That's right. It was about finding the small moments in life. I remember that now. Just being able to stop periodically and accept that right now, this is nice. This thing that we are presently doing is nice, and we should acknowledge that.
And
Yeah.
if we can somehow internalize the Tralfamadorian way of seeing, we're going to focus on the nice more often and less on the awful. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
In fact, isn't that what they try to tell Billy when he's on Tralfamador? Think about those nice moments. Focus on the nice moments.
Why would you focus on moments if you see everything all at once? You just told us not to focus on a moment.
I didn't tell you.
Well,
because the moments are where we find the beauty, right? The moments are where we find the beauty. It's where we break the cycle of this slow, painful march towards death. What was this all for, right? Billy Pilgrim has experienced the Dresden bombing. Probably the worst thing he ever experienced in his life, right? But being able to look across that whole span and say, that was one horrible thing I experienced, and here's 5 good things I experienced, right?
That's great, Brian. And I
Good for you, Brian.
Yes.
Another A.
Yes.
God damn it.
Yes.
Another thing that I think is important there is when you read chapter 1, one of the things that his father said about his writing is that there are no heroes and villains. And when you read Slaughterhouse 5, one of the things you didn't particularly like about it, Nate, was that the characters were all flat.
Yeah.
They were boring, in fact, you said.
I'm fairly certain I said I found them boring.
I know.
And that's what I felt like I was wrong in that assumption.
Yeah, but I'm just making the point here that what Vonnegut tries to do here is to give us a straightforward picture of who we are as human beings without awarding one a hero status or a villain status. These are just people we meet, like
Right.
Lazaro. What a jerk, okay? Look at the people that are in there. Rumford.
Lazaro is the one we identified as the villain, right? Remember, Brian, we were...
Lazaro was
Yeah.
the guy that was
He was a total asshole.
total asshole, and pulls the trigger at the end.
Yeah, don't mess with me, I'll have you killed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And if you look at all of the characters in here, whether you're talking about Russians or whether you're talking about Germans who run an inn after the war
Yeah.
and let the Americans come in and sleep in the stable,
Or the Englishman.
or the English guys, all right, I mean, what you get are almost archetypes of human beings in this world. And we, depending on our experience, tend to give them the label, oh, that guy's an asshole, that guy's a villain, oh, he's a Russian, he must be a jerk. No, actually, that Russian was fairly nice. Or what about those Germans? When Billy's resting, finally he comes out and he's in the cart, and the Germans notice the horses.
Yeah.
It's the only time that Billy cries. He doesn't cry when he comes out and sees all the dead bodies, or has to dig and make a
grave. Yeah.
try to free the bodies. He's been literally through physical hell, but he doesn't cry until he's laying in the sun in the back of a horse-drawn carriage by horses who are bleeding at the mouth and have broken feet and can hardly walk. And Billy's enjoying that beautiful moment. So it's almost as if there's just no way that one can live a completely pure, untainted existence without having to come to terms with that sorrow. But when you look at the gravestone, everything's beautiful and nothing hurt. How can you get to the point where you can say that the pain and the suffering, which is the first noble truth of the Buddha.
Oh, yeah, we both knew that.
Right. Okay. How do you get to the point where you come to terms so that you can say it's beautiful and nothing hurt? Well, very, very rare people, it seems to me. But that doesn't mean it isn't the only way we're going to stop war.
Yeah.
You realize that the only thing war does is make a flat, boring, dreary, dark, unhumane, if you will, existence, which brings me back to The Man Without a Country. Can I read you one more passage?
Yeah, we definitely have the time.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Okay. So here he is, just beyond talking about a world where people don't dream for their grandchildren. He said, I know, you talk about dark, he said, I know there's not a chance in hell of America becoming humane and reasonable.
Oof.
Jesus.
No, not Jesus. By the way, that's another thing we need to talk about. The Lord Jesus is in this book. Okay.
Oh, God.
I know. Yeah.
Is he shaped like a plunger?
Okay. See, we don't want to hear this. This is why we're talking about it. No, I'm serious. I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear the chances of America becoming humane and reasonable. We don't have a ghost of a chance. And he says, because power corrupts us and absolute power corrupts us absolutely. That's Nietzsche, of course. Human beings are chimpanzees who get crazy drunk on power. By saying that our leaders are power-drunk chimpanzees, am I in danger of wrecking the morale of our soldiers fighting and dying in the Middle East? Their morale, like so many lifeless bodies, is already shot to pieces. They're being treated, as I never was, like toys a rich kid got for Christmas.
Oof.
That's pretty heavy stuff. It's not exactly uplifting, but it's a reality that 3 years from the end of his life.
It just seems like a sharp contrast from do you like life better after having read these passages? Like, that's...
But wait
nobody,
a minute. He said that's what an artist does. He's not being an artist
This is an art... Okay.
He's not being an artist here. He's being a commentator.
Okay.
These are talks, these are speeches that he's given, things that he's written.
Okay.
And I guess you could look at that and think that that's what makes the message of Slaughterhouse 5 even more important, right? Like, what can we do? I was on a Skype call, listen to me, earlier today with a friend of mine in Austria, and we were talking about the state of the world and the geopolitical scene and what have you. And what I come back to is that there's plenty of people out there that as long as they have a TV and an iPhone, they're fine. What does anything else matter?
Right.
And
I mean, I'm guilty of that.
But I mean, are those people wrong? You know, what's the alternative? I mean, like, we can sit here and, as Vonnegut's saying here, just really like obsess over being rich people's playthings, but we have to find the joy in life. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? Obviously, like, you can't completely ignore it all and just drug yourself up with apps and TikTok. But, I mean, people are entitled to happiness wherever and however they find it.
You know, just try to limit my exposure to certain elements of society these days. You know, I thought if you looked at our news feed, you know, it's all comics and football for me. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, and unfortunately, some of the state of the day is leaking into that now. But there was a point where I would tell people, like, it's your duty to be informed. And now I don't even want to know. Honestly,
I don't even want to know what prompted you to say that to me right now.
Yeah.
Today. Yeah.
I appreciate Vonnegut's. I mean, I have difficulty picking up a personality out of a writing. And it's probably because I don't know how to read. But I don't.
All joking aside, I think the experience is a little bit different. Listening to somebody interpret the speech via audiobook versus sitting down and just immersing yourself in the speech.
Yeah,
right?
That's fair.
To begin with.
Well, it's a lot harder to cross-reference when you're listening.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was showing Nate that when I pulled this book out to read it again, I looked in here and I see all the places where I've cross-referenced and said, oh yeah, he says this over on page 20 and this on 212. You know, and it's sort of like you can see how one of the structural insights he had in putting this book finally together, which he struggled for so many years to try to do, was to come up with a structure and a form that folds back on itself over and over again. Everything you need to know about Slaughterhouse 5 is basically in the first chapter.
Right.
Not chapter 2 where it says Billy Pilgrim's come unstuck on time, but when he tries to get together with O'Hare and there's that whole personal narrative that is picked up with O'Hare and his wife, and then it's brought back at the very end of Slaughterhouse 5. He and O'Hare are going back to Dresden. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where you see the whole thing repeated again about if that isn't nice, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
Well, just take a minute to smell the flowers.
Yeah.
The rose water. You know?
I think that eagle-eyed listeners will remember from our prior podcast when I said I didn't like the first chapter.
That didn't register with me, and
Well,
I won't hold it against you.
So the first chapter, there's something about removing yourself and telling your audience from the beginning that this is a book. That I think my argument was that by eliminating the idea that this could be real, or that you immerse yourself in this story as a thing that could happen, you're divorcing yourself of it by saying, look, this is my book. All of this stuff is made up. You know what I mean?
But he doesn't really do that, Nate.
He does, though, because he says, here is my novel. It starts like this.
And it ends like this.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, this is separate from the story that you're about to read.
So I guess what Nate is saying is that reading this book feels less like you're reading the stories of Billy Pilgrim and more like you're reading about Vonnegut writing the stories of Billy Pilgrim.
Right.
Right?
Well, that's partly what metafiction is, because Vonnegut never leaves the novel.
Right.
There are many points in there in which he said, that was me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and when RFK is assassinated, that's part of the novel. That comes right in. So it's sort of like reality is not going to leave, even though there's a lot of fiction. All of these characters are modeled, well, I can't say all of them, but many of them are modeled after people he's really encountered and met.
Right.
Even Billy Pilgrim was a prisoner in Dresden. And I think his name was Joe Crone. He was not in Vonnegut's division, but Vonnegut had met him in Dresden.
Was he also a non-combatant?
Joe Crone?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
He was in the infantry and became a prisoner of war. And Vonnegut learns from his bunkmate in Dresden, because the Germans made them sleep two to a bunk. Vonnegut learns from his bunkmate that this guy, Joe Crone, was a real klutz. That, for example, when they were on a forced march, he didn't know how to pack his back, so his stuff kept falling out, and the guys behind him had to pick up his things and give it back to him.
Yeah.
He finally, in Dresden, I may be getting this all wrong. I'm trying to remember, but I believe he starves himself to death, and he's buried in Dresden. He was wearing, the time he was buried, a paper suit. If you can imagine that. A paper suit. Actually, paper clothing became popular in the 60s. But he apparently was wearing a paper suit. He was buried somewhere in Dresden and evidently starved himself to death. But Vonnegut takes that klutzy draftee who was drafted into the infantry and turns him into a major character for his novel. And Billy Pilgrim, of course, is a hoot. I mean, if you step back and think, well, yeah, he's a klutz too. The clothes he chooses to wear, the azure and the silver boots. In fact, if Vonnegut describes him as, Billy Pilgrim is Cinderella. Now, why? Remember he says that?
Yeah.
Why would he call Billy Pilgrim Cinderella? I mean, what do we know about Cinderella?
She turns into a pumpkin.
If she doesn't get
She
back...
didn't turn into a pumpkin.
No.
You know what I mean.
Yeah. But Cinderella's time-bound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he's the one that's unstuck. He's not time-bound.
That's right. When he's in Tralfamadore, and he time travels, but it's interesting that, as I recall, Billy Pilgrim becomes unstuck in time while he's still in the war in 1944. Okay?
And see, that was the other thing that bugged me a little bit.
It had nothing to do with the Tralfamadorans. But if he didn't become unstuck in time, he wouldn't have been able to go to Tralfamadore.
Right, but the thing that sticks in my craw a little bit is the idea that there can be a first time that you become unstuck. Because once you're unstuck and all things are non-temporal, then there was no first time.
Thinking in terms of, our attempt to rationalize that time travel aspect of it, it to me seemed like the earliest point in Billy's timeline where he was unstuck was during the war, right? Now, where and when was Billy coming from when he experienced that moment? Like, did the Tralfamadorians start it, the process, and then it just sort of branched out over his whole life?
That's an excellent question, Brian. I had that question myself.
Teacher's pet.
No, because...
Shut up, Brian.
The narrative's very clear that Billy becomes unstuck in 1944, but the Tralfamadorans had nothing to do with it. And my reading of that is that he becomes unstuck. Why does he become unstuck is another question, but the fact that he does become unstuck is what makes the Tralfamadorans possible. Because it's flying saucers, death, and time that he learns from the Tralfamadorans.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't happen until he becomes unstuck. And once he's no longer bound by time, he can be open to seeing things in a different way.
That's the only way he would be able to really accept the Tralfamadoran
That's right.
philosophy.
That's right. That's right. Well, the interesting thing, I just happened to turn to this. It's on page 30. Anyway,
it's on page what? I'm sorry.
30. So Billy says that he first came unstuck in time in 1944, long before his trip to Tralfamadore.
How did you pull that off? You just opened the book to that page? What?
The answer will come forth because this whole passage is about Billy joining the infantry, what? As a chaplain's assistant. A spiritual role in which he goes on to say he was powerless to harm the enemy or to help his friends. That's his role in the war. Okay? He was a valet to a preacher, expected no promotions or medals, bore no arms, and had a meek faith in a loving Jesus, which most soldiers found putrid. Then, the epigraph to this book is from Away in the Manger. The cattle are lowing, the baby awakes, but the little Lord Jesus no crying he makes. And that appears again at the end of the novel, in which he talks about the thing that Billy Pilgrim and Jesus have in common. No crying he makes. Billy doesn't cry about the war, but he does cry about the horses.
Well, a lot of people value animals' lives over human lives.
I think that, along with the bird and the tweet tweet, which appeared 3 times in the novel, I think that has to do with the importance of seeing our creation for what it is and not simply how we can use it. We can abuse the world, we can tear it apart with war, and that's what happened to these poor horses, bleeding at the mouth, their feet broken, being made to draw a wagon with prisoners of war, and Billy sitting around aimlessly enjoying the warm sun. And isn't this wonderful? Yeah, it's wonderful until he realizes the price he paid for it. Those horses are paying the price for Billy. The earth is paying the price for war. It's like that passage I read at the beginning where nobody cares about the grandchildren.
All right. Earlier in the conversation, the discussion was appreciate the small things. Now we're supposed to be frustrated by the fact that we're not recognizing what we lost in order to have the nice thing.
But Billy did recognize that because he broke into tears when he realized he was enjoying things without regard.
Isn't that what Vonnegut wants us to do, is to enjoy?
Yes, but with regard, not without regard.
Okay.
See, that's the difference between having all of these wonderful things that allow us to escape and dismiss our responsibility to become more humane and loving and compassionate and all those kinds of things that Vonnegut says it's never going to happen to Americans.
I mean, God, that's a balance to have regard for all of these things that you feel are horrible.
You have to find the beauty despite that.
Yes.
But then also feel guilty about having found the nice thing. Because that's what regard says to me, is you need to carry some weight with this.
Yeah, but guilt doesn't take you anywhere. If you disregard your realization when Billy wakes up to the fact that he was making the horses suffer, he makes a difference. He changes his behavior. He doesn't stop appreciating the sun and the warmth, but he no longer tortures the horses. Before that, he was just in the wagon, and he was just rolling along, out of the slaughterhouse and into a nice warm sun and the birds and the breeze, and isn't this so nice? That to enjoy this without regard was causing pain and suffering to other creatures. So it is a delicate balance. It seems to me that we're called upon to try to acknowledge and embrace, and that is that things are beautiful and they don't hurt, but they will only be that way if we live humanely and justly, and with care for the earth. That's what he seems to be coming to in his last book here, which isn't art, but it is truth. And art calls for us to like life better in place of all the horror that is presented here, all of the blandness, the gray, the dark, the so forth. I was going to ask you guys, what is it that makes Slaughterhouse 5 an anti-war novel? What makes it an anti-war novel is how we read it, how we see it. How do we see it? Is it showing us what life is or could be? Or is it just kind of a boring, drab, no heroes, pointless characters, blah, blah, blah. It could be read that way. In fact, one of the things I was telling your mom was that,
Do I need to get Mom in here? Hey, Mom?
No.
Okay.
Vonnegut, I never think, this is just me though, but I never think of Vonnegut as a science fiction writer.
Well, I didn't either after this book.
He uses science fiction. But he was nominated for the Hugo Award 3 times. He never received it.
Yeah.
But he was nominated for it, so obviously other people do think that he's worthy of being a science fiction author. Kilgore Trout, I always think is funny because this is an aside.
Well, we don't like tangents. We don't do
of course.
tangents.
We never
here.
do tangents.
Yeah.
Forget the tangents.
But where Vonnegut lived at the end of his life, he was friends with, get this, Theodore Sturgeon.
Oh, sturgeon, trout.
Ta-da!
Yep, fishman.
Theodore Sturgeon was a very prominent, eminent science fiction writer.
Okay.
He wrote hundreds of stories and published, in fact, he even did a Star Trek episode, Amok Time. That was written.
Oh, that was his?
That was Sturgeon.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that was a good one. And so, guess who Kilgore Trout is very likely modeled after?
I thought Kilgore Trout was the analog for Vonnegut.
Well, I think he probably is. I thought you guys mentioned that the last time, and that makes sense to me. But it's also a character that has a real-life corollary in Vonnegut's life. Maybe Vonnegut aspired to be a science fiction writer, but as you said, this isn't really time travel. They don't know what time travel is.
You're getting hung up on
Well, Dad's impression of you is right on the money, Nate.
No.
I feel like the alternative is the Millennium Portal. So we're like in relation to the Millennium Portal and the clock that went backwards and the time regressor. No, this is not time travel in that regard.
There's no mechanism. It is simply a state of being, kind of, right?
Right. So it was hard to rank as a method of time travel given was it even really happening? Because a lot of people just believed he was crazy.
If you're going to build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style?
So that's where I was coming from.
I was just going to poke the beast again by saying that you guys got to be careful not to interpret time travel in a linear way.
Beavis, we're trapped in the past. Oh, boy.
But Beavis and Butthead? Completely linear.
Hey man, they got it.
They got it. But the reason they get it is because they're on a line. They cross.
Yes.
And they come back. And they cross. And they. What are you going to do that? And that's a linear interpretation of time travel.
This sucks.
Yeah, me.
Yeah, we championed Beavis and Butthead for understanding the methods and repercussions of time travel.
But in this case, it is. First time he's consciously aware of being unstuck in time is, 44, 45, whenever that happens in the war. But when and where is he coming from in his life, and is that truly the quote-unquote first time he became unstuck? Like, that's not the point, right?
Since you bring that up, I was going to ask both of you whether or not there were any points in your own life when you can think that you were unstuck in time. Any moments in your life?
I can think of plenty of moments when I felt stuck.
Exactly. Well, we can all do
stuck for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, we can all do that. But the reason I ask that question is I think there are moments that we could point to. I certainly know that I've had them when I feel completely liberated from the stickiness of time.
Okay. Yeah.
You can call them psychological if you want to, but for example,
I call them weekends.
well, that could be. When I'm in my studio, when I'm working on my art, I don't know where the time goes. There is no time.
Oh, okay.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, there are moments when we are unstuck. And how do we do that?
Okay. Like an athlete that's in the zone,
Exactly.
quote unquote. Yeah.
Exactly.
Sure.
Like
sure.
I can't miss this basket, or
Yeah.
athletes talk about this sort of feeling. Yeah.
Where everything else just kind of slips away. When I went back to Vienna a couple months ago, we had just arrived in Vienna and we met some friends out, and I was sitting in a a plaza waiting for our friends to show up, and there was a little beer cart there. And there's a playground. Miles went over and played in the playground. I got a beer. I sat there, and I'm looking at this beautiful cathedral, and it was like 10 years ago, right? I was like, this is life as it was for me 10 years ago when I lived here, you know? Similarly, like everything else faded away, and I legitimately felt transported.
Yeah, you were unstuck.
Yeah.
And just imagine if we could communicate that to others, that we need more of that and less of the big bang from 30,000 bombs on Iran.
Yeah.
You know, again, I think that's what Vonnegut is reaching for. I mean,
Do you recall which class it was that you used this literature in?
yeah.
What class were you teaching?
We had a thing at the time that was called a first year colloquium,
Okay.
and we had them read between 10 and 12 texts during the semester, and Slaughterhouse 5 was one of them. So we spent maybe one, maybe two classes talking about...
Geez, sounds like you could have used a semester.
Well, you can. This book is packed.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I think this book is packed. When I reread it again, it was like, wow. I mean, one of the things that was interesting to me as I was rereading it, which I haven't looked at this book for 30 years almost. 30 years, 25 years.
Well, that's one of the things that we talked about, is neither of us had read it within 15 to 20 plus years. So we were also sort of revisiting this, and at a entry college level of reading that book, it was basically understanding what the Tralfamadorians looked like, you know, much less any of the things that we've touched on today.
Well, you had to draw a picture of it when you were in high school.
Yeah, I drew a picture on the test. Yeah.
I wish you had saved that. I would love to see the plunger guy with the...
It's probably downstairs in the basement, if I'm honest.
I would have really liked to see what Nate came up with.
That's probably down there.
When I reread this to basically respond to your request, would I come on your podcast, the thing that kept going through my mind at this stage in my life is, how in the world did I ever teach this?
So, I think you fell right back into it, Dad.
You could do it. Look, this is the sort of thing you can read and interpret one way and then reread and interpret another way. And I imagine that teaching it is probably the same experience, where you could, if you taught this every year, you could probably take a completely different track with it.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about that during 12 Monkeys.
Yeah.
Revisiting things and experiencing them so differently after the passage of time, because you're not the same person. So if you're not the same person, you're going to interpret this art or that experience much differently. This is kind of pedestrian, but I often think about the two jobs that I've done in my life are so vastly different that I sometimes find myself, like, I just think for a moment, like, if I got plucked out of what I'm doing right now and just dropped back in that manager's chair at this other job, would I be able to do that? Would I be able to just pick that job up and do it and remember all of the things that were my responsibilities and how to actually accomplish those things with the things in front of me? And one, I would never even want to try, but I mean, it's just curious to me how something can be your whole life for a while and then just be gone. You know, a job, a responsibility, a person in your life can be your whole life and then just then not be there anymore. And your life just keeps on going. And you think about, you know, your circle of friends that you had when you were in college versus your circle of friends that you had in high school. And how many of those people are you still connected with? It's usually like you pluck one or two out of a group, right? I mean, I don't know how you are, Brian, but
they're all gone.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and
not quite, but
you know, and the title of this podcast, the description of this podcast, based on our relationship, Brian, is two acquaintances become friends over time, travel.
Yeah.
Which I thought was clever wording at the time. But if I had to think of Circle of Friends now, as opposed to 15 years ago, Brian would be in that circle.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It just, life changes.
When I read it and I think of how much is here, I sort of feel like what you guys must have felt like with your last podcast on this book. How in the world do we get started?
Yeah.
It was true, yeah.
I told Nate that if I were to criticize your podcast...
We only allow 5-star reviews. I think
It's true.
Well, you were building the stars once you got going, I thought.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, guys, come on, this is a time travel. You can start with time travel. You eventually got to it, but it wasn't until 10 minutes before the end.
There's just too much. There's just too much here to unpack.
There's too much to unpack, and it seemed to me that time travel was the least important part of it at my reading.
But so here's what I get today. And we talked about this during the episode itself. Is Billy simply a passenger and this just passive, non-confrontational person just listing through life? Or does he achieve true enlightenment at some point? And after this conversation today, the enlightenment track seems to be the most obvious thing, which gives him a lot more agency, right? And that was one of the big things we talked about.
Right. He didn't seem like he was proactive in anything.
No, it just seemed like every aspect of his life happened at him, right?
Right. And that was one of the frustrations that I had. So, I mean, there's some revelation there that I think obviously brings another level to the story for me. I would still argue he doesn't take any proactive action to further his own story. He may have a revelation from his experiences, but I don't know that that's necessarily agency so much as...
Well, his agency is in trying to communicate the Tralfamadoran philosophy and way of seeing. His agency is being an optometrist for the soul.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We talked about being at the end and that when he's giving that speech and he's talking to the mass convention crowd or whatever. It occurred to me that he was speaking in a way that was much more in control and much more like he actually had something to share with people rather than just being kind of this quiet guy that everybody thinks very little of.
Right. And it's consistent with Pilgrim's role in the war because his kids think he's crazy.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Most people think he's crazy or that the letters he's writing to the paper are bunk,
Well, and that's what so many people think about the spiritual life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These people are crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, it's true. And what's the alternative to being crazy? Well, maybe the alternative to being crazy is picking up a gun and shooting somebody.
Well,
Well, I mean, that's what happens in the book, right? I mean...
Yeah.
Just because you're not spiritual doesn't make you violent.
No, it doesn't. And certainly, Vonnegut was a humanist. He couldn't be called a spiritual-oriented writer in the ordinary sense of the term. But in the extraordinary sense of the term, I think he was speaking to the human soul. And that makes him a spiritual writer in some respects. And we're back to the colors again. Those colors mattered. Brian pointed out one of the really important aspects here is that Billy's the only color in the whole book.
Well, wait, it wasn't there that soldier that draped himself in the American colors?
Oh, yeah.
The
Campbell,
Nazi that was...
Campbell, yeah, that was wearing all of
He
the...
wore the red, white, and blue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, that's what happens when you wrap yourself in the flag, as Vonnegut would not do.
Right. Yeah, I guess the only other thing that I would ask Dad is, because you were alive at the time, was there a...
I was there.
You were there. You were there. And one of the things I think we may have mentioned is that it's an anti-war book that came out talking about World War II at the time of Vietnam. And I was wondering whether there was any notable cultural significance the book might have had on the populace at the time, or was it just kind of came and went and discovered later?
Well, that's a good question. Well, my sense was, I mean, the movie was produced not long after the book came out, and the book initially did not get a good reception, but then later, with the whole move of the postmodern and metafictional structure, Vonnegut then really kind of took off. And Vonnegut, because, this is my impression anyway, because he's a Midwesterner, he's from Indiana, right? He's plain spoken. None of his novels, none of his stories, his lectures, his baccalaureate addresses, whatever he does, they are very unassuming. He didn't put all that philosophy in here for people like me. He just wrote it out, and then people like me turn it into philosophy. You know, you can see what's going on. And in many respects, for me, this is both the challenge and the power of real art, is that it doesn't set out to make a statement. It is the statement. So Susan Sontag, for example, said that art criticism is the revenge that the intellect takes against art. The artist is about presenting something that they want to be seen, not said. Okay, so I really believe that much of Vonnegut's writing, what makes him a literary artist, is that he doesn't have to be overt in what it is he does when he becomes a commentator and writes The Man Without a Country. There he's being a cultural critic himself. But when he's doing his art, whether it's his drawings or whether it's his writing, he's plain spoken, and he's, at the time, to answer your question, back in the late 60s and early 70s, he became wildly popular with students.
Right. People that were in school, so they didn't have to go to the war.
People who were in school and were reading stuff that was kind of avant-garde. I don't know if you ever would describe Vonnegut as avant-garde, but he certainly was one of the forerunners of metafiction and postmodernism. But it wasn't the highfalutin language that got him there. It was his storytelling ability, Nate.
What are you looking at me for?
Because you're a storyteller, and your books tell stories.
That's arguable.
No, it's not arguable. You're a published storyteller, and I think, well, I'm going off here as a father, but I think you're a great storyteller, and I think you learn from the narrative you tell.
Okay.
That's what I think about the art that I do. I learn from the art that I make.
Right.
I don't set out to make a statement. I set out to do a painting.
Yeah, there's some real truth to that. The book that I wrote, Riding Shotgun, at the time, when I started it, it was just, I'm going to do a Western, and I don't want to learn about horses and saddles, so I made them cars. And I came up with this notion like, well, why is everyone carrying a gun? Turns out now I probably didn't need to do this whole gimmick about carrying guns because everybody's got one. But at the time, I was thinking, okay, well, what if assassination was just a legal profession? And now everybody's carrying a gun and it's fine. Yeah, it was just setting out to write a story where some people could go down and have a shootout or something like that. But at the time, I think the Stand Your Ground law was being written. Right. And I incorporated that. I definitely learned in the process of making that, and I started trying to say something that I hadn't set out to do when I came up with the narrative. So, yeah, I get that.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, did we hit most of the greater points that you would expect in a paper from one of your students?
Oh, that's not fair.
That's a no.
No, honestly, I really think what you guys are doing is great stuff. And the fact that you would take on a book of this caliber and look at it in the same vein that you'd look at Beavis and Butthead. This, I think, is what makes your podcast, is that you're not being elitist in the stick up your nose kind of way.
Yeah, we also talk about Slaughterhouse 5.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, you talk about interesting, serious things, but you have fun doing it. And if that isn't nice, I don't know what is.
Oh, that's a good pull.
Yeah, we should probably end there, don't you think?
That's a good pull. I just wish, I wish you had been around for Demolition Man now. That's.
Nathaniel sent me a Father's Day card with King of the Hill. I loved King of the Hill.
Oh.
And I liked Mike Judd. I mean, his stuff is great.
Yeah, he watched Office Space for the first time recently.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't stop laughing. That was a non-stop laugher.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah,
that's really good.
Mike Judge is great. And is there anything, Dad, that you think that we should cover? Is there anything that you?
No.
Well, I'm just wondering. Is there anything that you thought?
No, you guys stop. Just stop what you're doing.
I just wonder if there's anything that you're like, oh, well, this is a time travel story I'm aware of. I wonder what they'd think about this.
Well, I saw a Star Trek episode again the other night, but I as I said, I told you I'm not familiar with science fiction. I don't know the world that you live in. You guys live in this, superheroes.
Yeah, we do.
DC Comics.
We sure do.
I don't know that world. I respect it, and I said,
what was it you said yesterday? I showed my dad the latest trailer for Superman, and he watched it, and then I think at the end he said, "Well, that's a bit much for me."
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I grew up with Steve Reeves,
George Reeves.
George Reeves. I liked Superman and I liked Batman until it got out of hand.
Yeah.
Which Batman was it that got out of hand?
I had trouble with the Joker.
Okay. Talk about a villain.
Yeah.
Nothing but pure villainy there.
There was pure villainy.
Yeah.
This isn't the world I live in, but I think the world you guys are doing with this podcast is wonderful. I really, even though I don't listen regularly because no, come on, give me a break. I can't listen when I don't know what you're talking about.
He's got a point, Nate.
No, it's not a judgment. It's just a funny statement.
But
even though I don't listen, I'm sure you guys are making some manner of contribution.
Well, the reason I can say that is when I have listened to things that I do know, whether it's Star Trek or Beavis and Butthead or Kurt Vonnegut, I can connect with what you're doing, and I think what you're doing is great. And Mom loves to listen to your podcast because we both.
Did I need to get her in here, Mom?
No,
where do you? Oh no.
We both appreciate the exchanges that the two of you have. It's clear that you're having fun doing what you're doing, and there's nothing wrong with having a podcast that is fun, but also opens your eyes every now and then.
That's the whole point. That's the goal.
There you go.
We did it, Nate.
High five. High five, right. Demolition Man style. Yeah.
How about Star Trek style?
Oh, there you go. Yeah, we could do that one.
Is this at all what you were expecting?
Oh, this is good. No, it's good. It's good that he's doing most of the talking.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I was hoping for.